the screen pop up. So I don't know who wants to dive in first. Maybe Kirsten, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for putting me on the spot there. So in one of my former roles, I had moved in from international trade into supply chain security, and those two things were pretty well linked because it had to do with understanding the supply chain on both sides. And so I stood up a supply chain security program, and I did a pretty good job at it. And so my bosses came to me and they said, "Look, we want you to stand up an aviation security program." And I'm like, I have no idea what that is. Like, what is involved? They're like, yeah, we get it, but we know that you can do it and you can learn it, and we trust that you're gonna, succeed. And it's like, okay, no pressure at all. So, I jumped in with both feet and, fell a couple times, but, it was a really safe place to, try different things and create different programs for our commercial airplanes division. Got to work with some very high level government officials in TSA and developing, first state of the art programs for TSA and the private sector industry. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And it just opened up a whole other chasm of really interesting things. And it just kept leapfrogging to different points in my career from then. So I tell that story because I think it's important to recognize that, you can study, you can have a job plan and hit all those milestones. And then all of a sudden you end up in something you completely did not expect to end up in. And so just be open, right? Because I think that one element taught me that I can apply my skills anywhere I go. And as long as I've just got, positive attitude and I, ask for help along the way, which is like the biggest point of strength that anyone can probably have, that, you're able to do just about anything.
Mm-hmm. I love that you talked about leaping in, and then you did fall, but you said that there was a safe environment for you, right? And so one of my favorite quotes is the concept of failing forward. You have to take risks and know that you're going to fail. And as long as you fail forward, you're good. But then the other thing you brought out that I love is that, as leaders, for those of us who lead teams, creating safe environments where your people can do that is one of the best things that you can do as a leader to help people advance in their career, is creating a safe place where asking questions is valued and people can take risks and fail forward. So I love that. Thanks for sharing that story, Kirsten. Alicia, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, going into security with the intentions of going to law enforcement, that was always something that I wanted to do. And we talk about falling into security. I don't think that there's any little girls out there. I know for myself in particular, dreaming of becoming and going into security. But one of the pivotal moments was working with a colleague who was ex-law enforcement. We're working on a community kind of action task force, and talking to him about how I wanted to go into law enforcement, and that was, my plan. And he's like, Alicia, he's like, you're where a lot of, law enforcement want to be at right now. You're in a role that you can work with and do what you want to do in this role. And it was like an aha moment, because law enforcement was something I wanted to get into, but, carrying a gun was something that I didn't really want to do. And that's where it opened my eyes, and I was just all in after that. So it's been really exciting, and I've had the opportunity to work with law enforcement and still kind of, build this dream job that I never expected that I would be in.
Mm-hmm. I love those aha moments, right? When someone says something to you and you just wake up and you're like, oh, it's always good to have people in your life that'll call those things out, because that can be really helpful. It's great. Thanks, Alicia. Lisa.
So I had a lot of those, but I'll tell you probably the very first one was, as I mentioned, I fell into law enforcement to start with. I wasn't sure that's what I wanted to do. And I remember after getting out of the academy and being on the street for the first time, probably my first night shift, we had to arrest individuals for breaking and entering and trespass, and they were homeless. They were 2 or 3 gentlemen that it was freezing cold, and they were in some what appeared to be an abandoned home, and we had to make those arrests and take those individuals in. And I did my job, and the very next day I called my brother, who career military and was in Vietnam. And I told him, I said, I really don't think this is what I need to be doing. I don't know that this is me. I don't know that this is something that I can do for a career. And he told me, he said, Lisa, it doesn't matter what your career is, as long as you treat every single person you come into contact with dignity, with respect, and remember that every single person is someone's mother, father, brother, child, relative, and that they are deserving of that dignity. And it was, I had an epiphany, and I went back to work ready to do whatever job that I needed to do. So that was probably number one.
That's a good one too. And I think that taking those morals into your career and really knowing what you stand for help you plan it out and stay on track with whatever comes at you, to be able to take those risks because you know who you are and what you stand for. So sort of building on that, it sounds like we all have had paths that kind of have surprised us and gone different ways, but I imagine that each of you have put some planning into defining where you want to take things in each of your new roles, or as you were applying to new roles. And so the next question is really about, like, how do you define your path, and what advice do you have about, like, defining a path, managing a career path, for those who are trying to figure out where to take their career in the security industry? And I don't know, we'll mix it up this time. And Alicia, you can go first.
And I think that the thing for me, and I try to tell people, is that it's not like a linear path. It's not always straightforward. It's not going forward. Sometimes it's, sidestepping and, just being really open. There's so many different areas to security now that, for me, when I first started off, I had no idea. So it's just being really open and bringing your true self to it as well. There's some things in your job and your career that you may not like to do, but you need to learn that skill in order to get you to the next level of whatever that may be. And it can change too. So I think it's just understanding that it's a work every day, and sometimes you're gonna change your direction, and I think that's okay.
I love the skill building, because I always think that, like, the best thing that you can do when you start a new role is actually, it seems crazy, but think about where you want to go next and then figure out how to develop those skills in the job that you're in now, right? So that you're constantly preparing for that next step and investing in yourself. I agree. Lisa?
So I think for me, when I moved into the healthcare environment, it was not because I had, as you mentioned earlier, dreamed of always working in healthcare security. It was a personal choice that we thought I would be able to work more Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And I was going in there with what I thought was going to be this just great pedigree, and be able to really show them what security was. And again, another epiphany. And I realized just how much I did not know. And I was able to see this potential for a career, especially with those individuals that were not a part of security. A lot, as many of you know, in healthcare, a lot of your leaders are women, and they're strong women. They're very competent women, and really taking their lead to be able to further my career. Again, as I wasn't even sure this was going to be my career path, but it was amazing. Just going in there with that open mind, you really do not know what that next step's going to be, but find someone who is doing well and loves wherever you are. Those are the individuals to follow.
That's good. Yeah, the mentors and people who inspire you definitely make such a difference. I couldn't agree more. Kirsten, what about you?
Yeah, my path just kind of happened, and I think that's kind of the beauty of it. I'm a huge planner, but when I look back on my career, I realize I didn't follow the plan I kept laying out for myself. Like, you always have like those 5-year plan templates, and you fill them out like with a mentor, and you start working towards it, and then you kind of like get like a squirrel moment, right? And you get distracted, and you go off to find something sparkly and shiny and new on the other side of the fence, right? So I look back on it, I kind of giggle because I'm a huge planner and I didn't ever follow my plan, but I've always really enjoyed kind of where I've landed, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever an opportunity came, I always said, sure, I'll try it. You know, I'll see if I am successful or if I completely bomb it, and that's okay too. So, you know, I'm new to healthcare and it took a ton of guts to like leave a company I had been with for over 2 decades. And I had tons of different jobs there, but I was there for a really long time. Never thought I'd work there to begin with. And then, you know, now I'm here and I'm like, wow, holy smokes, I've been missing out. There's like a whole new world out here and it's super complicated and really interesting and super intelligent minds that are thinking on different planes that, you know, we weren't exposed to in the aerospace and defense market. So it's a really dynamic industry here. And what I love is what we're doing. It really, really matters to like everyone that we're engaging with, not only in the industry, but the people we're serving. So it's inspiring to be here. I'm honored to be here. And I guess I would just say that realize that whatever dream job you have on that like 10th rung of your, you know, 5 or 10 year plan, it may not have been developed yet. So just write something down that you like would like to do, and you can create that job like when you get there, right? So just be open-minded and entertain things.
Yeah. Do you think that the act of planning, like you said, you wrote it down, just that act of doing that, even though you didn't stick to it, did it help you check in with yourself when you were presented to see if it aligned with what you like, your values at least, that you kind of defined in that process?
Yeah, it did. Because, you know, I would go and I would like look at different things, and then I would do just that, Liz. I would look at the kind of the value systems that were associated with those types of roles. And if I found they didn't like meet mine, like maybe they were shiny and sparkly, right? But they didn't meet my value system, I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to do that, right? I'm going to pivot and go do something else. So
yeah, I think that's really good. And just a book to share that I use and have used with people I've helped in their career. There's a really cool book out of the Stanford Design School called Designing Your Life. And you can buy it on Amazon. And basically they use design thinking to help you prototype different versions of your life that you might like. And so then you figure out how to like test different things in your work life. It's just a really fun, creative way to think about your career. So if anyone's in a place where they're trying to figure it out, I highly recommend the Designing Your Life book. I've bought it as gifts for lots of people in my life because it's that good. So thanks, Deb. Clearly she's seen it too because she was ready there for that book. Okay, so those are great, again, I think advice, and it's about knowing your values, following your gut, listening to people around you. We talked about a lot of really great things, and I want to build on the concept of having people and role models in your life that Lisa sort of brought up, and talk a bit about mentorship. So we're going to ask a quick polling question of the audience to pull you guys in. So Lindsay, if you want to launch the poll, but we want to know how many of you guys and gals, feel like you have solid mentors and sponsors in your life. Hopefully that poll's up on your screen and you guys can click it there and submit. And then we'll have Lindsay show the results here in a second. And Lindsay, you can share once you feel like the majority of people have answered. Or Deb, or whoever's controlling polling.
Or I think we're just about there.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so good. A lot of people feel like they have good mentors and sponsors in their life. So that's good. I'm glad to see that, because I know sometimes people feel like there's a formality to mentorship that can be intimidating. And, you know, sort of, how do I ask somebody to be my mentor sort of thing? But it looks like this audience has some good mentors. So for our panelists here, I'd love to hear from you, and I'll start with Lisa, sort of building somewhat off of some of the things you said earlier. What role has mentorship played in your career progression, and what advice do you have for your audience with not only finding a mentor, but managing the relationship with the mentor? Because I'm guessing you're a mentor to people and you've been mentored. So I'm sort of curious to learn from each of you guys how you manage that.
So for me, the very first mentor I had was actually my mother, and I had no idea that she was my mentor. So I say that for those of you that may be parents, that you may not realize the importance, especially for young women, how you conduct yourself. My mom led me to believe that I was just as important as anyone else. There was nothing out there that I couldn't do. And because of that, I seemed to have more confidence. She pushed me to do things, to get out there and, do some sort of volunteer work. She pushed me in academics, and she pushed me to pay it forward. Good things happened to me, to pay that forward. And so because of that, the other two mentors that were at the same time was the CEO and the COO of the hospital that I went to work, because these individuals in no way treated me, and this was in 1987, a few years ago. Things were a little different. We were not all seen as equals, but they absolutely treated me and held me to a standard that it was wonderful. And I basically made them my mentors. I told them they were my mentors. I put them on the spot, and it was great to have these male mentors amid a group that was predominantly female that worked for and with these individuals. So it had a huge influence on me. In fact, I told both of them if they ever decided to no longer work at the hospital and decided to run for president and vice president of the United States, I would literally stop working and campaign and just be there for them. They meant a lot to me.
I love that. I love the story of that, because you get so close to mentors who really help you with that and hold you accountable. And I love that you said you made them mentors, because sometimes just finding someone you admire, like you talked about, and asking them questions and then casually saying, you're my mentor, right? Like it can be the best way to get a mentor. So I love that. I love that a lot. So Kirsten, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I like that Lisa brought up kind of, her mom. I remember I had a couple coaches in high school in sports. I mean, I was terrible at sports. I'm still terrible at sports, but, the coaches were always really encouraging, right? Like, look, we know you're terrible, but we have a space for you, there is a role for you on this team, right? And I feel like the best mentors find the right spot for the person to succeed and shine, right? And then they challenge them in that space, because that's where they're successful, so they continue to challenge them. So I think that's a really key component to being a mentor is, finding the shiny spot and then, putting a spotlight on it. Yeah. So I guess I would say that if you're looking for a mentor, anyone who's ever asked me to be a mentor, or I just kind of found out that I was their mentor, to Liz's point, is that the relationship you have with them, it doesn't have to be super formal, but you have to have a plan, right? In order for it to be a really successful relationship, you have to have 2 or 3 goals you are wanting to achieve. Otherwise, you're just going to talk about the weather, right? So if you don't talk about look, I'm really an introvert and don't like public speaking, but I know I need to get better at it, right? They can pull you into small forums, right? And challenge you in those areas. But if you don't have some goals laid out, you're not really going to, engage a whole lot there. So if you're asked to be a mentor, say yes, but make them develop some plans or some goals, and then you develop the plan, with them to achieve that. And then if you're a mentee, next time you go ask someone to be your mentor, saying, hey, I saw you do this, or I heard about you doing Y, and I really like to figure out how to do that for myself.
Yeah, and I agree, because what you started to talk about is when you transition to having from a mentor to a sponsor. And one of the best ways to have a mentor turn into a sponsor is to have a plan and manage that relationship with your mentor, because they know you're organized, they know they're helping you, there's good feedback. It ends up being this really good exchange when you have a plan and you're prepared. And that really helps build trust between you and your mentor, and then they can become a sponsor who's somebody that's going to really help push you in your career. So I couldn't agree more with that. So Lisa, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back earlier on my career and mentors that I had, again, I didn't realize that they were mentoring me because it felt comfortable. It was just an open conversation that we had. And then some of the feedback that they gave me and helped me grow or helped me look at myself and what I wanted to do, I was like, wow, they were mentoring me. So one of the things that one of my mentors would always say is like, tell me more, tell me more. And that would help keep me comfortable and just talking. And so now when people ask me to formally mentor them, it's like, tell me more, tell me what's going on, tell me what you want, tell me where you're at. So it's just having that comfortable conversation, but then also being comfortable, be uncomfortable. Like they're gonna say, hey, where are you at? Why aren't you here yet? What's going on? How can you get there? So yeah, sometimes it's not even realizing that you are mentoring somebody or being mentored. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up uncomfortable because it actually is a good transition into the next topic because, being uncomfortable in your career is part of career progression. I mean, I'll be honest, I took a big promotion recently and there's moments of uncomfortable moments for me. And I remember I had a young woman recently ask me, do you ever get insecure or feel like you don't know what you're doing? And I was like, I should admit this out loud on this recording, but every day, right? And so the concept of imposter syndrome is something that I think is really important to talk about when we talk about career progression, because then it ties back to Kirsten's story of taking the leap, right? Which she's done a lot. And imposter syndrome can sometimes get in the way of you taking a leap, because basically what it is it means that you feel like you're an imposter and someone's going to figure out that you don't know what you're doing, right? And so, that's the fear, and that can hold us back from doing things in our career that we would otherwise do if we didn't have that fear of like someone's going to figure me out. So if you guys can talk about real quick anytime, like if you've experienced imposter syndrome and what you do to overcome it when you've been faced with it. So Alicia, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, most definitely. On the daily, I feel that for sure. But one of the things I think we talked about is there's going to be fear, and you just got to go out and go back to your experience and your values and saying, hey, I'm making the right decision. Build a good team around you as well of people that you can go back and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Is this right? One of the things I tell my daughters, because she's always saying, I'm scared, I don't want to do it. It's like, I'm scared all the time, but that can't stop you from doing something. And as long as you go back to, again, your experience, your values, I think that'll, help you to make the right decision. And like we've talked about, you're going to make bad choices and bad decisions, but as long as you have a good group of people around you to help support you and fail forward, like you said, Liz, I think that's what, keeps kind of me going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Community can really support you in those hard moments for sure. Kirsten, you want to talk about imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I feel like I play it every day like everyone else. I used to continually play down my accomplishments, and then I would get really frustrated when people would have a party because they came to work that day, right? So I'm like, people are really celebrating like the really, really small stuff, and I've done some really amazing things. And so, it took a long time, but that frustration of that pushed me to start tooting my own horn. I'm a pretty big introvert. So social media has kind of been a really big help because I didn't have to physically be putting myself out there in front of an audience, although I've done that a lot. I've spoken to thousands of people in an audience before, but I never would have done it, but been able to do it before, at least not well. So finding ways through, social media, podcasts, forums like these where you can talk about your successes, you can help celebrate other people's successes too, I think has also been really helpful in receiving that praise and that accomplishment. I think as women, we always try to play things down because we, that's just kind of our mantra. So, us being able to support each other and celebrate our successes, even the day that you came to work, right? Because sometimes it's hard to come to work. We can celebrate each other, then I think we're more apt to take that praise on for ourselves too.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that you've tied in uplifting yourself, but then uplifting others, because I know we talked about the importance of allyship, right, in career in career progression, especially as, you know, women in an industry that's very male dominated. So I think that's good. And the more you do it, the more others do it for you. There's just a lot that comes, what goes around comes around, and lifting each other up. Lisa, what about you?
So I think, and I don't have the exact percentage, but men more often apply for jobs and positions that they don't quite have all the qualifications, but they think that they can, they know in their heart they can absolutely do it. Where women, if we don't feel like we meet all the qualifications and maybe even supersede those qualifications, we just don't even apply. And there's studies out there. So number one, I wanted to say that and remind us of those things. And then I have certainly been a victim of imposter syndrome, even as you mentioned, Liz, even recently. And I think what it has helped me do is all of a sudden I'm motivated. I'm going to learn all those things that maybe, you know, you never arrive. And I've been doing this for a lot of years. And I think that's something we always need to realize. We never arrive. And if we're stagnant, if we're stationary, then we are stagnant. We need to always be moving forward and not failing. Just move forward, just go and learn and push yourself. And again, I think it helped me because I am not going to lose. I am going to learn those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when we were preparing for this, we talked about one of our key takeaways was you have to own your own career progression because it's in your hands, right? And so what you're sharing there is that, you know, and I when I'm interviewing people and I'm hiring people, I look for this, like, is someone going to go figure it out? Can I trust that if they don't know, they're going to be scrappy and resourceful and not cower, but say, you know what, I'll get back to you on that, or those sorts of things. And so I think that, you know, we've talked a lot about values and really knowing your values, and I feel like that can help in imposter syndrome, as well as really owning it and celebrating yourself, and really taking the opportunity to be deliberate and focused in managing your career. Let's see, if we fail to learn from our mistakes, it's a missed opportunity. I agree. I don't know, you've got a number for a name, but that's a great comment, whoever you are. I like that comment coming in. Okay, so let's switch and talk a little bit about, actually, first, I don't know, Lindsay, I don't remember how we wrote the polling question, but do we have a polling question that basically says, asks people who has experienced imposter syndrome? Hi, Gabrielle.
I will launch it right now.
I'm curious. Now that we've talked about it, I want to see how many people have experienced it. I have a feeling it's a high percentage. And I know men and women experience it too, because it's funny. I've talked about it. And, you know, it's a term I learned, I don't know, in business school at one of my women's panels, they talked about it. And I remember every time I bring it up, men and women are like, oh, yeah, I have that. And, you know, so many people in the room don't know what they're doing and are making it up. I feel like we're making up life a lot of the time. So it's good to kind of talk about it and realize that we're all figuring it out as we go. And that's why we got to work together.
It looks like we have a few more people to answer, but if they don't answer.
Okay, you can release it. I'm sure we've got 100%. That's what I thought. It's a thing that we all experience. So yeah, it's a good topic, and just remember you're not alone. And that also helps in those moments when you're feeling overwhelmed, is knowing you're not alone in it at all. So let's talk now about a little bit more about diversity. This is a women's organization, and so diversity is important for everyone, allies and women alike. And so the question is do you all feel sort of the lack of diverse leadership? I think that in the security industry, it's only like 4% of leadership positions are held by women, and the industry itself is 30%. I can't remember the exact stats, but it's pretty low. So do we feel like the lack of diverse representation in the security industry is a factor that impacts progression for women? And if so, how? Does it help? Does it hurt? How do you navigate it? What have you faced in your careers? So I don't know if Lisa, you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure. I think when I first got into this industry, it was definitely something that was out there. We were, I think, affirmative action allowed us into the workplace, but we were basically expected to fail and work twice as hard to prove ourselves. And over the years, because of a lot of wonderful young women that have come in there, I think that it's those that want to go into leadership find a way, and I think the door's open. I have found, and granted, I only have a very small path to look at, but most men in security leadership are genuinely committed to gender rebalancing, but we give them a lot of mixed messages. Sometimes they're told that that gender is just a women's issue, and we're asking them to create all these networks and empower women, but we've got to remember that it's gender balancing should be a push that unites all of us, and we really kind of help them understand that that's our role. We really want this to be an improved performance for business, and I think just knowing that there's more business out there, women are more customers than men, just kind of reminding them that we want to be a part of the success of the organization.
I love that. Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Starting off in security, I was the only female in the room and Latina as well. So it was something that was very, clear to me that did need to change and still does. I think it's only 7% of females in security. And it's getting better. It is. And we just have to be conscious of it. And like Lisa said, it's everybody's effort into making sure that it is more diverse. But it is something that I'm very keen on in with hiring or even interviewing, making sure that there is a diversity in that, especially with certain roles, whether it's intelligence or other types of roles that may have ideally a specific type of gender type that's going to be in those roles. But yeah, it's definitely different, but we still have some ways to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kirsten.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what both Lisa and Alicia were mentioning, but, I think we have to have allyship, of all genres across our industry. But I think, we're at a really pivotal point in the industry and time right now because there are different markets of security opening up, right? It's not just guns and guards, right? A colleague of mine calls it guns, guards, and gigabytes, right? Like there's all sorts of different realms to security today that there's, it's just the aperture of opportunity is opening up that almost tailors more to what women are looking for in order to support their own personal lives as well. So, we have a long way to go. We all need all the help that we can get with support each other, support from others. But I do feel like we are at a pivotal time that if we look back in 20 years, if we look back to today, we're going to be like, oh, wow, we were really on the cusp of something that we just kind of didn't realize it. So I just would continue to tout the whole leaning in environment, right? Like just try different things and lean in and be courageous and don't be afraid to fail and you'll succeed every time.
Yeah, I think I had somebody say to me recently, I was faced with something that was really challenging and it felt gender related. And somebody said to me, remember, Liz, you're a trailblazer and you're literally just at a point in the trail that there's some branches across, and I'm an equestrian who rides in the trails and I have a little saw. When I get to that, I get off my horse and I cut the trail. And they said, just lean in and cut down those branches and keep going, right? So it's really about that right now. And I think I have incredible male allies around me who support me and have really helped me. And I think that, that's been the cool part of the Women in Healthcare Security organization that we started at Kaiser. We have more male ally members than we have women members at this point, right? And everyone's excited. And we talk about things just in the 4 years we've been working on this. I hear things out of the mouths of my male colleagues that I would, in a positive way, that I wouldn't have heard in the past, excited about an all-female team, for example, excited about sort of, we're looking at how we're going to talk about maternity leave and, like rights for nursing mothers and things like that, these things that we really need to look at, in our industry. And I think, that's the part that's really stood out to me when I think about where we have to grow is even some of the ways that our policies are written and some of the cultural expectations in the industry they need some work, right? And I think that the world is pushing us to challenge the status quo. And this industry is not going to be left behind in that. So I agree, Kirsten. I think that there's a lot of work to do. And I think you're right. It's a pivotal moment right now is the time to really be looking at this. It's exciting, actually. So, Lucy, I saw you come off mute. I don't know if you were going to comment on that.
If I may, I think that, back when I started as well, is everybody in security had either law enforcement or military experience, and that's not the case anymore. You don't need that. I mean, I certainly don't have any of that in my experience. So it's just a matter of the foundation that you have, the values that you have, and are you willing to work hard? And you do. You're going to have to work hard. So I think if you have that, common sense and working hard, that you can make it in the security industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had no experience in either of those things and very little in the security industry, but have really found my place. And there's several people that I've hired who have the same. So it's exciting because there are, pulling other people in with new skills. There's a lot of that happening. Okay, so one of the questions we talked about was this concept, you hear in your career, like you want a seat at the table. And how do you get a seat at the table? And then, of course, we're in a virtual world now. Not everybody, obviously the security industry, there's a lot of people who work in person, but there's also a lot of people who work remote. And so we talked a little bit about, how do you get a seat at the table in general, but then also how do you get a seat at the table in a virtual working world? So I'd be curious to hear your advice for people. I mean, each of us have a seat at the table in a different way, and what you've done to get yourself there, and your advice to other people on how to get a seat at the table and what that looks like. So, Kirsten, you want to kick us off?
Sure. God, you say that and a story comes to mind. I was meeting with a bunch of government officials, with a bunch of senior corporate executives at my prior life. And I got into the meeting early, and I sat down at the end of the conference table to plug in my laptop to just get a couple of emails out. And I lost track of time. And then people started coming in, right? And they took all the seats at the table. And I'm like, okay, but I was actually the reason that everyone was there. But I had never met anyone in person, right? It was just been like teleconferences. So no one actually knew what anyone looked like. And so the meeting got started, and here I am sitting at the end of a table, like in front of the computer, area, right? Like I'm like the administrative person, and they're like asking questions, and I'm trying to interject because I'm the one that had the answers to these things. And they kind of were very dismissive. And then finally, one of the executives who knew me was like, no, we need to bring Kirsten into the conversation here. So I tell that story because not only if you're going into a physical room, make sure that you pick a place at the table and in the room that not necessarily as a power position, but as a non-dismissive position, right? So don't sit on the sidelines, don't sit at the end of the table, right? Get there early enough where you can, present yourself in the right realm. And also, when you get there, don't just sit down and start looking at your phone, right? Get your guts, right? Stand up, walk around, say hello to everyone, introduce yourself, shake hands, right? Or bump elbows in today's world, right? And, because they're probably feeling nervous as well. So if you just take the first step and present yourself as kind of like one of the leaders in the room, that it'll put everyone at ease, and it'll make you look really good and make you feel really good too.
Great. Love it. Alicia, I think you have stories about this too.
So this is going back probably 5 or 6 years now, pre-COVID. It was me and our intelligence team, all-female team. We were in the conference room to present, some of our findings. And I sat at the table, but the other ladies that walked into the room with me sat outside of the table on the side, because they knew that leadership was going to come. And again, all leadership was all male. So where are you guys sitting at? Come to the table. You guys are going to present. Oh, no, we don't want to. So I think the thing is that take your seat at the table, actually physically take it and be present. And like Kristen said, pay attention. If you have something to say and it adds value, then say it, and, feel comfortable in that. And it is hard. It is hard to do that, especially if you're an introvert and you're not really sure. But if you're sure of your stuff, then, take your seat and say something.
Mm-hmm. Lisa.
So I took it more as a, I guess, philosophical seat at the table. For instance, I had one of a female officer who worked for me who was like, "How do you do that? How do you have the job you have? How would I? What do I need to do? I'm getting my master's degree. I'm this. I'm that. And how do I get that seat at the table?" And what I told her is, this was healthcare again. I said, the healthcare industry measures outcomes, mainly patient outcomes. A security leader needs to be measuring outcomes, whether that's looking at workers' comp injuries, anything else that's going on, retention of the clinicians. How many people are leaving the industry because of workplace violence. Measure that, and then add in your mitigation efforts, and measure it over time, and make sure that you're the person doing that. Bring that to the people that that matter. Bring that data. Data is, in my opinion, what brings you and makes a seat at the table for someone who maybe there wasn't a seat. The seats are full.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that, because I was going to add the importance of being deliberate about managing your personal brand. We've done some brand workshops as part of Women in Healthcare Security, and one of my favorite brand workshops I went to, the woman tagged it as, "What do you want to be known for knowing?" Right? So if you get clear on what do you want to be known for knowing, and then to your point, Lisa, you can put metrics behind the value that you're providing and what you're knowing, and you can get invited to the table if you're really clear on your brand, and you can work on, because then they say, well, Jess is an expert in that. Why don't we have her join this focus group? Or we don't, and then you start to get noticed and you start to get invited into things. And I really think being deliberate about your brand. And if anyone here has never been to a personal brand workshop, I think we might have recordings, or it's something we can do again in the future. But it's, and there's lots online, but I think that's also a really good strategy for getting a seat at the table, either literally or philosophically. So we've got about 8 minutes left, and I want to leave time for audience questions. This has been fantastic. So does anybody in the room have questions? You can either put stuff in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to ask questions. If not, I'm going to start asking you guys questions. So I think I see some people coming off mute.
Hi, sorry, French accent here. So I'm Pascal. I'm honestly, it's inspiring to hear you. It's just exactly what I was looking for. I was a manager, come from healthcare and logistics industry, very new to the security industry, so feel a little bit like an imposter too. But I love it because it's real people and hard worker. And I just had one question for you. So what advice would you give me or give the people in my situation that don't come from a security background? What should we do to make our career advance in this particular industry? Is it to take some specific classes? Is it to I'm kind of trying to navigate this, and I don't have any mentor in the industry. So I think it would be good for me to get one as well. But
Yeah, I'll start with that if I can, Liz, because I'm new to healthcare and security myself. But, especially if, from the logistics side of things, there are so many elements from what you are an expert in that haven't been introduced into the security realm. And if you can find ways to apply kind of what you already know in a security light, it will probably shake things up in a really good way. So I wouldn't focus so much on what you don't know, but focus on what you do know and figure out how we can apply it in the security realm.
Yeah, and I would add that, so I was similar, right? I came from outside of the industry, and I remember the day when one of our security managers stood up and said, "We're so glad to have you and your team here because you have skills we don't have." And the value, and it was like we were welcomed in because they realized the value of a different experience, and that how that was really helping the whole organization thrive. So Lisa, I saw you come off mute. I don't know if you had another comment on that one.
I did. One of the things I think that it's important is maybe look for some credentials. some sort of learning, and then be able to have something that lets others know that you're in that field. And something that is huge right now is any type of risk organization. For healthcare, it's the healthcare risk managers, the Association for Healthcare Risk Managers, because everything that we're being held to, we need to be balancing the risk. And that's what everybody wants to know. Well, what's the risk? And is that something the organization is willing to take on?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Deb, do we have anybody coming off mute?
We had a question on the chat from Mark Wombo. He says, wonderful session and sincere thanks to all of you for sharing your stories. You touched on a point a bit earlier, but I love your thoughts on how men and allies in general can both better support diversity initiatives in our industry and champion the amazing critical contributions women are already making across security.
Who wants to take that one? What can our allies do to support and champion?
Yeah, I think in just asking the questions of the people that you're working with to see how you can support. There's a lot of volunteer work out there, or just being a mentor as well, and how you've been able to further your career. How can you pass that on to somebody else?
I think also, it's great that we have these special sessions, right? And that, usually when you're at a big offsite, you denote 15 minutes or something to a special session on diversity. And it should just be part of the thread that happens every single week in everyone's, operating rhythm. Right? It shouldn't be a special thing you're doing. It should just be part of our ingrained, work ethic. So if we can just work to get it there, then we won't have to think about having to apply diversity tactics, because it'll just be part of our culture.
So I think too that it would be great if men are a little more deliberate. As we mentioned here today, women sometimes are a little fearful that they do not actually have the qualifications. So maybe as you're looking through a job that's getting ready to be posted, thinking about individuals that might really be a good match, regardless of their gender. But also remember that women, it's a little harder for us to get outside that circle. And I think it's really important that line managers, whether they're male or female, are also educated on how much better a company performs the more diverse it is. So really kind of keeping that top of mind, and it really has to start at the top. We can't just assume that people already know this. I really think that would be great to have just a little more cheerleading from the top.
Mm-hmm.
Can I
Yeah.
add, Liz?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Liz had brought up a really important topic that is on all the diversity and inclusion classes you may take. Is take a look at your job descriptions on the recruitment level, right? Because sometimes the language on it can be more or less inviting for diverse candidates. So that's a good one. But we also talk a lot about allyship on our internal ERG, and we have some great examples of allies' actions, creating safe spaces for women to be authentic and speak up, providing growth opportunities equally among male and female workers, giving credit where credit is due, speaking up when witnessing unfair situations. That's a big one, right? Encouraging dialogue regarding diversity and inclusion with colleagues, and then having awareness about the women's challenge. So ask questions like Elisa said.
Yeah, and that speaking up one is really, really big. So the pieces I'd add to that is look at who's at the table and pay attention to who's at the table, and ask, is it representative of the rest of the organization? There's power in diversity of thinking and diversity of life experience, and if you want to have an innovative, really savvy problem-solving team, it needs to be diverse, because otherwise you get in the sheeple effect. If everyone's the same and has the same experiences, educated the same, you get kind of often similar responses to challenges. And then recruitment. I've had a lot of people in this industry say, well, we don't get women candidates, or we don't get diverse candidates, or we don't. And I always say it's because you are recruiting the same way you always have recruited. And so to get more diverse candidates, it's stuff like this, right? So it's everything we talked about, uplifting, allyship, mentorship, but it's also going out there and finding them, right? And it takes a little bit more work. And like, that's what I think the industry could do, is be more deliberate and not just hire whoever applies. Because back to what Lisa's saying, there's a lot of, what Lisa said earlier, there's a lot of women who look at a job description, and if they don't have every single thing on that job description, they don't apply. That's way more common than men than women. And so you have to be deliberate with your recruiting team and ask them to go out and very deliberately look for women or diverse candidates. So that's what I'd add to that. So we are at time. If we missed anyone's questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will find a way to answer them. I just want to say a huge thank you to our panelists that joined us today. This has been a tremendous opportunity for all of us to learn from you all. And we hope to see more of those of you who participated today in future Women in Healthcare Security events. We're really excited to see all of you, especially those of you from inside and outside of our organization. Any closing comments from our panelists before we wrap up? No. Okay. All right. So again, remember, you have to own your own career progression, be open, trust the process, take leaps, and fail forward. And we wish the best to all of you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.